Hey, welcome to the Front Porch Podcast, where we have intimate intergenerational conversations to connect, build, and learn from each other. I am Candace, a Gen Xer, and my lovely co host is Mikhail, who is an older millennial. We learned a new term today. We're going to tell you about that later. On this episode, we are headed to the front porch to talk about embracing failures and mistakes and redefining success. So, Mikkel, who's joining us on the front porch today?
On the front porch today is Dr. Angela Webster, Crystal Balogun, who I affectionately call Pooh, Mia Meadows, and Isaac Cooper. Hey, y'all.
Hello.
Hey.
Thank you so much for being on the porch with us. Please, before we get started in our conversation, a much needed conversation, please tell us a little bit about yourself and what generation you're a part of. Let's start with Mia.
Hey, everybody, Mia Meadows. And I am a part of the micro generation between Gen Zers and millennials, and they're called Xenals. And that's because we were kind of on the cusp of all the breaking technology. And I'm here with y'all from Little Rock, Arkansas.
Nice to have you, Mia. Isaac.
Well, Mia just educated me, so I really don't know what I am at this point. I was just gonna say a millennial, but I think I'm in between there. So I'll send you a private message just to make sure my numbers align. But I think I'm a millennial.
I believe you're a millennial.
Okay,
you're younger than me.
All right, cool.
Yeah. Pooh.
Hi, I'm Crystal Balogun, everybody. I didn't realize it, but I'm a baby boomer. The last year of my 50s. I hate to see it go, but but embracing a new decade, I guess. A little bit about me, real quick, is that I'm a lover of life, and whatever I can do to pour into another person, especially a woman of color, I'm your girl.
Thanks. Thank you, Crystal. And Dr. Angela.
Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Angela Webster, and I also represent the baby boomers. And I am a mom, a glam mom. I'm an executive. I'm a coach. I'm a friend. And my life is dedicated to human flourishing in ways that alleviate human suffering.
Come on, healers.
I know we're going to start the collection plate early.
I love it. And finally, we have boomers on an episode. We finally have boomers, the wisdom and the light of boomers. So thank y'all so much. Okay, so here's a little appetizer before we get into the main dish of our conversation around embracing failures and mistakes and redefining success. So fill in the blank for this, and we'll start with Isaac on this one. First thing that comes to mind. Being my authentic self is.
Easy.
Dr. Angela.
That's the only way I know how to be.
Mia.
Is liberating.
Crystal.
Letting me off the hook.
Candace.
It is freedom, and it is also hard to do in spaces that invalidate your presence and existence.
I would say being my authentic self is weightless and something that I'm growing into more and more.
Weightless. That's good. So thank you guys for that. I think that really sets the tone for our discussion today on the front porch. So let's kind of get into a little bit of this topic. So I just want to ask you all, and we'll start with me on this one. If you can just tell us a little bit about some of the messages that you received around failure and success, and how you kind of internalize some of those messages.
Yeah, I was thinking about that. For me, it started, I had a very strict stepfather. And I can remember coming home. If I came home with an A, I was good. But if we came home with B's or C's, I had to explain why it was a B or C. If it was a C or D, I was in trouble. And so that immediately sent a signal to me about what it meant to fail. And it equated me getting in trouble.
Mm.
So I carried that message. I mean, I remember I was in college for the first time and came home when the professor like wrote on my paper, was like, you shouldn't even be in college. Yeah, I needed some help
Wow.
writing, right? Oh yes, it was brutal. And I got an F on this paper. And I remember calling home, telling my mom I was going to quit. I had failed, right? It was a paper, it wasn't even a full grade.
Mm.
Um, but what I have learned about myself is that if you give me 24 hours, I'm going to cry, I'm going to scream, I'm going to kick, but you're not going to tell me what I cannot do.
Come on.
And so we found a pathway, and I'm going to be in that class, but I have carried those messages like I'm grown and I still sit with myself, even now, questioning whether or not I have what it takes. But it goes all the way back to childhood.
Mm.
Most things do, don't they?
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
Isaac, what do you say? What would you add to that? What have been some of the messages that you've internalized?
Yeah, it was actually through the prism of sports immediately, right? Win or losing, right? Did you win? Did you lose? And even the competitive nature that some sports demand, there is this numbing of oneself that you have to the emotion of not of things not going your way. Is even the position I played playing football. One of the things that's been communicated, since the creation of football is really we say play the next play or have a short-term memory, right?
Mm,
So someone could catch the football on you and it may be 50 yards, everybody's yelling, you feel bad, but 6 seconds later you gotta get back ready, right? And so like the as I look back, the time that I allow myself to resonate in some of the things that didn't go the way that I anticipated, that muscle of like just keeping it moving was through football. Now in the business world, right? Like when it's more so from the neck up, you can't compensate for a feeling just by physical activity, right? Like you got to think through, you have to feel the emotions. um and as much as I appreciated that muscle in regards of just like internalizing that aspect quickly, um, there was a development that I saw that I was missing out on in regards of like learning myself, during that, grinding process of just not knowing or, feeling like that I wasn't enough. Um, or even having metrics that, because when I got into the financial industry, my metrics were more tied to people that didn't look like me on what success looks like.
mhm,
Success for me was, less of a tangible number, but more of impact that couldn't be quantified, right? Um, but it took time. It took time and people to not allow their perspective to have the authority over my um, what I deemed as success or not.
mm, okay.
Mhm.
Dr. Angela?
Well, as I think about it, um, I start with my parents, and my parents didn't really place a lot of pressure on us as far as success or failure. What they highlighted for us was to always do our best. So do your best. If it's worth doing, it's worth doing well.
Mhm.
And whatever you do it with your might. So they never really categorized them as success or failure. So that sent me to the world looking. Of course, that's a really bad idea as a baby boomer seeing how my parents grew up in segregation and we were living in public housing, but my parents are really good people. They went to work every day. They didn't call in sick. They didn't take vacation. They were honorable, all of that. And so I was trying to figure out, according to when I did start looking outward, why did they not appear to be successful according to the world standard?
Okay.
And so that really plagues me quite a bit because I thought, well, they're such good people. Why aren't they succeeding according to those standards? And so I really, over time, came up with my own definition of what failure is and what success is. And I have just used those as my models for gauging where I am in life.
Mm. Mhm.
So,
So my answer is probably pretty much a little bit of what everybody has shared, especially being a baby boomer. Um, Coming to DC when my mother was about um, 8 weeks away from delivering me, she got stuck here and couldn't go back to North Carolina. And so I was born here. We went back, and then, you know, 15 kids stayed with grandma while parents came up to DC to get their footing. My mother was a school teacher, which I hated, by the way, because she was always in my business in my school without it, you know. And my father, and here's where the contradictory of my life began. He was someone that often went to jail. Um, and, you know, where I saw other school teachers, their husbands were principals of schools or doctors or, you know, but why is my father like this? He drinks too much and he always goes to jail. So
Mm.
that's what started this, you know, I don't know, for me, imposter syndrome. Like, you know, I had to be all these other things or check these boxes that I thought would equal success, right? You know, my mother's successful. She's a school teacher. She, you know, um, tutors kids. She travels. She does all this stuff. But yet I love the life that my father lived, the gambling, the fast life, and so when I, you know, finished school and started working for DC public schools, there were so many things that I thought that I wanted to change. And almost like what Isaac said, you know, the position that I was able to get over 20 something years ago um, was not a lot of female leaders. We were secretaries or executive assistants, but not ops directors. And so I battled with, again, the imposter syndrome. Am I good enough? Am I smart enough? Yeah. Am I, do I dress the right way? Should I put on a suit every day? Or am I good with my leggings and a long sweater? You know. So those were my battles, you know, trying to balance the success and failures. One
Mhm.
from my past, and then trying to, you know, clear the way for where I am now and going into my future endeavors.
Mhm.
yeah, I love all of that because it just there's so many threads I think that we could pull on, and I think we will over the next few minutes here. But I do want to just kind of pick up on something that I think I've heard all of you say, which is the way in which you've grown or expanded, how you think about success, what it means to you, how it's evolved. And so I'm just curious to know what were some of the things, or what were some of the ways that you grew from the way in which you define success or failure, or from some of your mistakes, like how did you grow from those things? What did you learn from those mistakes, or however you define a mistake? Because maybe it wasn't necessarily a mistake, but just a little opportunity for growth. So, what did you grow? What did you learn from those experiences? Me, how about we start with you?
Hey, it's interesting. So I tell folks I have a master's in counseling, but I'm still in counseling. I'm gonna have a therapist. Well, and part of me unlearning the unhealthy ways of thinking about failure and success really started on my journey in 2005 when I sat in front of a counselor for the first time to begin unpacking all of the different messages I internalized. And here I am still doing the work. I think for me, and on this specific thread and journey, um, I've just been taught so much. So my grandmother had a huge part of my upbringing, and she never said you need to be this to be successful. She said you have to be self-sufficient. That's what success was. As a single mother of 4 kids, she didn't want me to struggle. She didn't want me in the projects. She said, I don't care how you get there, just get there legally, is what she said. What that situated though for me was let me work all the time, let me climb this ladder, let me figure out this next move, while also having a poverty stricken mindset, which was also just this huge battle, right? And I think my relationship with Christ and understanding my identity and trying to do that work helped me understand and free myself. I have a really good mentor who said to me, an error is never a mistake unless you refuse to correct it. So I try to look at failures now as mistakes. Did I try to correct it? Did I try to make it right? Did I tell somebody? As a matter of fact, y'all, I made a mistake. When I say Zennials, I meant between Gen X and Millennials.
Oh,
No, I think we're kind of close up a little bit.
Mia, can you hear us?
Hopefully, she'll pop back in.
Hopefully she can pick up where she left off when she comes in. But other thoughts from either Issac, Dr. Angela, or Crystal?
Well, women and people of color are known for beating up on ourselves for the ways that we think life didn't go our way. So one of the things I'm learning is that if I make a mistake, when I make a mistake, if I fail, when I fail, I see it as the universe telling me to go in another direction. And the other part of that is, for me, failure means there was something for me to learn and to take away from it. And as long as I do that, then I don't count it as failure anymore.
Learning opportunity.
Right.
Yeah, I was really going to say the same thing. Even to the point, I don't even know if to be honest, I don't even know if I've ever articulated the term failure, like when it pertains to. To be honest, I don't even know if I've said it because I don't want to internalize that, to Dr. Angela's point, because 9 times out of 10, just with the experience that I've encountered or something, I had an expectation and it didn't go that way. There was a growth opportunity there, but I had to see it that way first, right? And so when I think about the pain or discomfort or the frustration that I'm going through, is one or two things. One, I'm growing, but two, I'm going through this to be able to share it with someone, right? And so even if the outcome did not go the way in which I anticipated, I'm already thinking about the person I need to communicate that to. I don't know when it's going to happen, right? But I know that this experience wasn't just, happenstance. If what you're doing is for, a proper purpose. Now, if you're out here just, kicking rocks and, doing some crazy stuff, then, then didn't work that way. But just the term failure for me has been less of a binary type of description, but more of a comma, right? Like it's not a period when something doesn't go the way I anticipated. It's a comma. It's just, you know, what am I going to do after that moment, right? Like, am I going to, you know, stay in that frustration and that emotion? Not, you can still acknowledge it. You don't want to, you know, ignore it, but it's just, I'm not going to give it authority in that moment, because again, I should be discovering what it is that I need to be focused on to make sure that the end goal is executed.
What got you to that place to be able to see failure as something that isn't indefinite or isn't the end or something that defines you? Like, what work or realization did you go through to see it as more like an ellipses?
Yeah, I would say the moment I took all, and I'm not, the moment I took all the excuses off the table, like the moment I knew that I could not go to anyone outside of myself, I knew that there was a, well, let me back up. I think it really was, it concretized itself when I knew the work that we were doing was going to outlive me. So it really didn't matter how I felt. And I oftentimes have to remind myself, like, Isaac, this isn't about you, right? Even if it's something I don't want to do, but the outcome is what we need to manifest in regards to the community work that we're doing or clients that we're working with. So there's just been a few experiences that I've gone through to where, you know, a buddy of mine told me this, and I remind myself in moments. He said, Isaac, all bad times have an expiration date. And even when I think about the times that, you know, what it could be money related, it could be family related. Like even the times I think about the most um, um, sensitive areas that was very what's the word I'm looking for, vulnerable for me. I was very vulnerable in that moment. um it transitioned to something else, right? Like a month ago, there was something that was a priority that I was frustrated or upset about, and it evolves. But and I think the liberating aspect of the ellipses of that dot 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 or the comma is the fact that you know, we have our own business, and so the ability to change my emotion with action is not predicated off of, you know, another entity's infrastructure.
Mm, mhm, mhm. Thank you for that. Hey, Mia, welcome back. You were right at the point of explaining the zennials, if I'm saying it right. Can you jump back in there?
My bad, y'all. Technology dysfunction. I was saying that I was going to correct my own mistake real quick. And Zennials is in between Generation X and Millennials. And I said it wrong at the beginning, but now I've corrected it. So that's all I was trying to do. Model that behavior. Look at that.
Crystal, what about you? What's on top for you?
So I'm just, you know, reflecting on how, similar to what Isaac said, like you couldn't say you failed. You just, you know, first of all, we were taught to keep secrets, right? You better not let nobody know how bad we're doing in this house, you know. And so you would, you know, put on a new sweater, and but you may have, you know, generation of somebody's girdle or skirt or slip, you know what I mean? And so you always fix the outside.
Mm,
Meanwhile, the inside was rotten and dying, you
mm,
know, with not feeling good enough, not measuring up, and not um, fulfilling your purpose, all of those things. And someone shared this with me. It took a long time though, that your most devastating weaknesses, as we may see it, can be an asset to someone else because you are sharing your experience, how you got through this difficult time, you got to the other side, you know. And so use that as an opportunity to learn, an opportunity to grow, and an opportunity to pour it to someone else.
Mhm.
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 I love that because it makes me really think of just how in education, at least, we talk about the whole achievement gap all the time.
Yeah.
And it's always, okay, there's this, the gap between the students that are, on target and the ones who are struggling. And all they need to do is just get over here to the other side. And
Mhm.
my thing is always, how are they going to get there?
Yeah.
If that is what we're talking about in terms of expectation standards, whatever that is, success, how are they going to get there without some kind of bridge? And if they look over there and they see that looks great and wonderful over there, but I'm cool over here because I know what this is, like they may never see that as achievable. So I'm always inclined to say, okay, those of us who have figured out how to navigate, how to get over there, how to whatever it is, you know, that we were trying to attain, we got to be able to, at least for our children, we got to be able to stand in the gap. It's not about the just cross on over and get on over here to this other side because it's great and wonderful, but how are we actually standing in the gap to be the bridge for them? So what you said makes me really think about that in terms of how we define success and failure and all these various and multiple pathways towards success.
Yeah, yeah. And I would just add to that. I believe everything starts in the mind, right? So we can build a bridge and the how to and lay out the blueprint and co-navigate with young people, but it starts in the mind. And I'm not saying I have any solutions for like what that looks like, but it is a mindset, and everything that you all have shared, it started with in the mind and what you internalized and what you
Mhm.
processed and what weight you took on from somebody else's expectation and standard, and how you shed that weight to redefine for yourself and in your mind how you define failure, how you think about your value. So I think that's so important. So a lot of what we've talked about is like your own individual journey, and this question still is in that realm. But how have you all navigated tending to family and meeting the needs of yourself and your family while also navigating the expectations and standards of success that have either been imposed upon you, that you've either internalized, or things that you've sought after? How have you mitigated, or how are you mitigating that?
I believe I was a mother who, of course, loved my children, uh, did whatever I could for them to make their lives better than mine. But I always prioritized myself. And in the Black community, and especially my connection with the Black church, I caught a lot of flack for putting myself first. As an example, I divorced my kid's dad. I guess we divorced each other. He's not still married to me, so we divorced each other. And, and literally, I divorced in July. I was sitting in graduate school in August. And everybody was like, oh my God, like you need to be taking care of your kids and what's going on. And, he made, twice the amount of money that I did. So I didn't have to, I chose to sell the big house and move into something that made sense for my budget. And as a means of preparing for my future, I went immediately into graduate school, and everybody says, you need to get a second job. And everybody had their idea of what my pathway
Mhm.
to a brighter future should be. And me being in graduate school was just not anybody else's design besides mine. And I just decided, I knew intuitively, in order for me to be a good anything, good mother, good Christian, I had to be a good Angela. I had to be true to Angela before I could be true to any other cause in my life. And I knew that education was that glide path for me. So I took that, but family, friends, colleagues, my family, my church community gave me a really hard time until they could see the fruit of my labor.
Mm.
Mm.
I was my children say, I don't think I was a great mom. My children say, Mom, you were a phenomenal mother. You just were not a traditional mother.
Mm. So, Dr. Angela, would you agree that taking care of self is taking care of your family?
there's no other way you can do it because you're going to implode, explode, or just pass out if you don't.
Yeah.
Like, how are you going to guide them when you don't have a compass for yourself? I was showing them, I was modeling before them, your life can fall flat on the sidewalk, as flat as a pancake, but here are some ways you can get back up for yourself. And I did it in a way that wasn't a look of desperation, like I gotta get another job. Yes, we moved, we moved out of the big home, but I moved into a better neighborhood in a smaller home where my children felt safer. It was more of a community. So I made it look like, oh, so you can get back up again, and it doesn't have to be a desperate move.
Yeah. Issac, you have 3 beautiful babies under 5. So how do you navigate self and family with the expectations of success? And what questions may you have for some of the moms?
Yeah. It's something that I'm learning as we go. One of the things, so I'm Jamaican by blood, Floridian by birth, and Jamaican parents. But with my father, I knew who my father was. He lived with us, but we didn't necessarily have a relationship. So it was four boys, 1 girl, 5 of us in total. We speak more now than ever. Like even in the last couple of years, we've talked more than we've spoken my whole life, right? And so our relationship has definitely evolved. But that was my template in regards of like not really having any type of communication with a male, a black male, right? Especially my father. And through that, and also through sports, which is why I often say coaches are like substitute dads, right? Because the coaches were the ones that I was able to see some of those principles, but that element of just intentional time, I didn't have a blueprint for it with family, especially not being able to recollect in regards of like as a small child, like, it wasn't like Disney World or things like that. So it wasn't like major memories outside of sports because I played sports all growing up. That was what I thought was my identity. And so getting into the financial industry, being the only black in the state of Alabama, I saw models of other men with children, and I saw what I didn't want to do. I didn't like the fact seeing cats at the office at 7 p.m. I'm like, bro, you married, go home. What we doing? I didn't like the fact of, I remember vividly being congratulated in high school for certain things. If it's awards or sports, get an interception, look up, I don't see my parents there, right? And so those emotions will never leave me, which is why I'm gonna be at every game, which is why I'm gonna be at practice, which is why. So I made sure as the business was evolving that I started to crystallize and start putting because I don't think work-life balance is, I don't think the balance is the word. It's more so the boundaries. Like what boundaries do we need to put in place? Because it's always going to be, some type of like it's always going to have that element of it, right? And so coming home, I make sure as much as I can. Again, I'm not 100% consistent, but I try to I try to I strive for it. Phone to the side, I'm communicating with my kids. They know I'm a playground. So if they jumping, I'm jumping. You rolling, I'm rolling. So it's making sure staying involved with that, but also just having like intentional time, like literally intentional time. I've challenged myself because my wife knows that if it's not on my calendar, it doesn't exist. So how come I don't put my family on my calendar? And so like I've had to implement some of the infrastructure that I put in the business with the family, right? The grace that I have with certain clients. Oh yeah, it's all right. But I don't have that same type of grace with, my wife or whoever it may be that's closer to me. And so seeing models of what I didn't want to do, but also being intentional with the time. And then not being married to a schedule. My favorite schedule is not having a schedule with the family, right? Like, let's just figure it out. Because then now there's more time for disappointment. Oh man, we didn't get here in time. Nah, we're together. Even if we're just in a car, like that's precious time. And sorry, I'll get into a whole rant talking about that. But yes, for the mothers, I would love to hear insight on the best way to communicate. So let's say we have 2 separate days, right? And now we're coming together for the family, the household. What is some of the best practices in regards of engaging in communication once you kind of align, with your significant other or just in general?
Ask them.
Okay. How was your day? Or is that more so like just
Asking them how they want to spend that time together.
okay?
They I can guarantee you they have ideas about that.
Every single time. Yeah. Every single time.
And I would add, I think your questions matter. I remember I used to just ask my kids, how was your day? And they'd be like, good. And I was like, what does good mean? It's like, there's like this whole list. And so now I'm like, what was the best part of your day? And tell me why was that so best? Tell me what's one thing you could have done better today. When we get out the car, as you were talking, Isaac, every moment matters. I start every morning with an affirmation with my kids, and we take turns leading it, and it's the same one every day. And so we've actually like gotten this rhythm with them. And kids will tell you. I even ask kids for feedback. Like my kids are so brutally honest. I was like, I have two. I have a 9 and 12-year-old and my son. I said, Josiah, I want to ask you for some feedback as your parent. And I said, how can I be a better mom to you? And he looked at me and he was like, well, you could quit being so hard on Elena. And I was like, you think I'm hard on my daughter? And he was like, well, yeah, Ma, these are ways I think you're hard on her. And I was like, oh, that stung. So when you get ready to ask some kind of questions, be ready for some real answers. Because what I'm learning is this is about generations. Gen Zers, and now we're at Gen Alphas, they want authenticity. They want real trust. They want you to pull behind the curtains. When Chris, when you were talking about, getting the outside together, but not the inside, Gen Zers and Gen Alpha, they want to know what happened in the inside. And so with my kids, I've tried to be much more open about myself. Some ways I'm not ready for their follow-up questions, but those moments matter.
Yeah, that's good. Thank you.
That's that real authenticity, right? And I so agree that the younger generations, they are demanding that. They are not accepting the superficial, real pretty answers. They're like, I want the nitty gritty. Yep, all of it. Tell me everything. Dig down in there. And that is hard, I think, for any other generation, because that's not exactly, those were not the messages about. Success was supposed to look like a certain way, and you had to show up in this successful persona. And I'm Generation X, and we absolutely lived through all of the Black excellence and the buppies and the this and the aspirations, and it had to look like this, you had to sound like this, you had to dress like that, you had to drive this, you had to have the big car, and so what, you are the $1 million in debt, do it anyway. We lived through some of those messages, and I think that has hurt our generation for sure. And some of those messages, I think, have even been passed to some of the younger generations. But I love the fact that these young kids are like, give it to me.
I think it depends on the household, right? Like as Mia was stating, the open discourse and dialogue and like leading with authentic curiosity with her children, that matters, because even with Gen Zers and the Alpha generation, everything is filtered. It's quick TikTok shorts. It is super long claws and spiderweb. Like there's a lot of filtering. There's a lot of inauthenticity that I believe parents are navigating and putting on the full armor of God to combat. So shout out to you, Mia, and what you're doing in
cool.
your household and what you're doing in your household as well, Isaac, and what you, Pooh, and Dr. Angela, you all have done in your households and even for your grandchildren, because it's very real out there.
I think that that's probably a really good segue even to the next question about just how you would diagnose the world that we are currently living in, with all of the filters and this whole idea of being perfect or perfectionism. And what is a prescription to all of that you all might offer? So how would you diagnose it? What does it look like to you? And then what's a prescription for maybe some of those things that are not working? Or even, and I'll even flip it and even ask, what are some things that we can continue to do that's working?
I'm happy to kick that question off because I've been trying to wrestle with it, especially with my kids and dialogue and conversations and getting them off their cell phones and shutting stuff down so you can learn to engage with people.
Mhm.
I think for me, as I think about our current society, we are still very much caught up with capitalism and consumerism and wanting to be like the next person, right? So if we're not careful with all the inputs we're putting in our brain, whether it's social media or TV, you'll be quick to find yourselves trying to measure up to somebody else's standard of success or failure. And I think an antidote to that, I've been really thinking about spiritual practices, and we've just gotten away with a lot of them. We don't really use them. But I've been on this whole kick about Sabbath. And I think it was Walter Brueggemann who coined Sabbath as resistance. And what does it mean to actually practice the Sabbath? To actually get off your cell phones, to get out and go for a walk, to have conversations, to not have a schedule, to practice present, because that was a gift, right? So I'm not going to preach on here. But for me, practice back in our lives, like Sundays used to be sacred. Like I grew up, like it was a sacred time. It was family time. It wasn't always perfect, but I had a day from work. You didn't touch it. You couldn't get on my schedule. Don't call me. Um, and I mean, we used to sit around food. Like I just remember the memories of grandma waiting up at 6 o'clock in the morning, fixing a full Sunday dinner before going to church. And then everybody would just come out and hang out. And I think we've just lost a lot of that because we're so busy to the next thing. We don't even know, right? Like companies are advertising to keep our attention. And so we just have to be much more aware and cautious of that. And I think one spiritual practice of really keeping Sabbath can help.
Mhm.
But what I'm learning is, as I, really reflect on my life and be introspective, number one, I'm so grateful for the foundation that my parents gave me to cultivate character and integrity, morality and ethics. And I think I grew up in the tradition of the Black church, and that church supported those notions. And so, I've been on a lifelong journey of that. And at some point, I realized, oh, but to actually be successful out there, um, you need some credentials or education or something.
Mm-hmm.
I got on that parallel track with my character. So that now it's character and my intellectual development. So what I have been learning, since I've been over the age of 40, which started last week,
Right. Exactly.
in my senior years, I have had to adopt a third parallel track of wholeness, cultivating a journey of wholeness. And and I always thought somehow my spiritual journey was going to automatically get me there. But I think my spiritual journey was so focused on character development because that's what my parents um, elevated before me. But I've had to deal with wholeness because, I'm not saying this for all Christianity, but the Christianity I was taught said that you don't put any stock in your emotions, you ignore your emotions, you can't trust them. But now I'm learning that as a human, we've been given emotions for some very good reasons. I mean, children don't have the wherewithal for intellectual processing, but they have emotions to tell them when something's not right. So I've had to learn how to own my emotions, feel them until I can heal them, and really figure out a way how I'm going to deal with my emotions and disappointments and all the things that happen in life, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And so I've kind of developed this system where, I have information in, which is, books to give me strategies, podcasts, and all of that. But I have this information out, meaning how do I process it all? And, journaling has been such a boon for me in that instance. But just realizing what I need to make sure I'm whole, not just spiritual and not just smart, but whole. And that keeps me from falling into the traps of crazy debt, falling into the trap of I've got to have the next iPhone. Well, I get the next iPhone when my old one is no longer working. Or I don't have to have all the trappings that TV say we're supposed to have. As a matter of fact, I cut the cable cord, but even all the things that I stream, I have no commercials on them because I don't want you trying to sell me anything. I don't need your suggestions for anything in my life. I can think for myself. And so I've just had to adopt that last pathway of wholeness to help me to maintain what I know is right for me.
Mm. So then, Dr. Angela, if you identified this third track of wholeness that was necessary, you identified that last week when you turned 40. How can a young man or a young woman that is 21 or 17, how would they begin to embark on a track of wholeness?
I would say first and foremost, getting to know who they are as an individual. For instance, when I was, let's say in my 20s, let's say when I was in college, I remember I could just be walking down the street. All of a sudden, I have this sad feeling. And I was just kind of go, wonder what that was. And then in my 30s, I would say, I wonder, what was that? And then in my 40s, it's okay, what was I thinking about? What was I thinking about? Who was I thinking about? Where was I? I really try to pinpoint why did that fleeting emotion go by me? And then actually start to process that as opposed to just letting it go. Because, anytime we bury our emotions, they just, they're buried alive. They don't die. And they rise up at the most inopportune time and in the most inappropriate way. Why am I saying this with Mia on this call? Because I'm all over in her lane.
You have life experiences. Thank you for that. Crystal, you work every day with young people. So what, from your purview, how did we get here in this space of like this curated, filtered, perfect is everything, perfect is goals, and what prescription would you offer?
So it's funny you should say that. On Friday, I just got to tell y'all this really funny story, right? On Friday, it's dress down day, but I didn't want to be all the way dressed down with a uniform top and jeans and so on. So I had on some ripped jeans, not too ripped, just showing the knees.
Okay.
And a peekaboo. Y'all know what a peekaboo shirt is, right?
Mhm.
Okay. So I had on one of those. And this 8th grader, she was like, Miss Crystal, what is wrong with your shirt? I was like, what do you mean? I thought I spilled something on it. She was like, well, if I can't show my cleavage, you can't either.
Well,
All right.
Now,
does she have a point?
like, you see my neckline? This is what was showing. But usually they see me in a sweater, a hoodie,
Mhm.
and that was eye-opening for me. Like, they have a certain image that they see Grandma Crystal in, right? Versus her being human and, feeling a certain way on a certain day and wanting to express that.
Mm-hmm.
And it just got me thinking that one, she trusted me enough to say that, to be that open, right? And to be that honest and to almost hurt my feelings a little bit. But I heard her. I heard her. I heard her, oh, I may be the only grandmother image in this baby's life.
Mm.
And and quite frankly, I know that I am, because her mother calls me almost every day for guidance, advice, and how to raise her kids. Mikhail, that's something that's not new. You know that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so how do I get to this space of embracing, her rawness?
Mm-hmm.
These kids nowadays, I mean, have the courage to say what I wish I could have said at 18, 19, 20 years old, and have a open conversation with an adult and get the guidance and feedback to help me grow through it.
Mm.
In case in point, and I'll share this because I battled with this for years. I was a sophomore in college, and I thought success would be to marry my high school sweetheart, have a baby at 19 years old. We would get married and ride off to the sunset. He would finish college, and I'll be the housewife. Y'all know that didn't happen, right? I did have a daughter who, oh my God, I'm so grateful. What I thought was a failure, I mean, she is phenomenal. I thought that was one of my most devastating glares, right?
Mm.
I learned so much from that.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my God, being a single parent for over 13 years, working two jobs and going to school, um, so that she doesn't have to feel what her mother felt.
Mm.
And that was a sense of failure. Because I told you, my mother was a school teacher, and what was school? You got to go to school. You can't do anything else but to go to school and church. That's it. School and church. That's it. And outside that, you don't need no life.
Right.
And of course, I rebelled and didn't want to do any of it. But just having those life experiences, and I'm able to be transparent and share those failures, those mistakes with my daughters.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we're so close. We talk about just the freedom to be able to talk about anything with my daughters. I couldn't do that with my mother. You had to sit up straight and act like you wanted to crochet, knit, and play the piano. That stuff, y'all. I did, but so I learned so much. I learned so much from this generation. Last thing I'll share is my granddaughter. When I transitioned from elementary school to middle school, my granddaughter was going into middle school, and I was really nervous and apprehensive. And she was like, "Grandma, don't worry. I'll show you how to be the best school grandma for middle schoolers." And she did. I would take her with me. And she would, we would have conversations, and she would say, "Oh no, don't please, don't stop them from using TikTok, Grandma. They love that." She taught me how to interact with, the typical middle school student.
Mm.
And so here we are 4 years later.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, relationship building is key.
Other ideas. What's how are we defining this space that we're currently living in, and do you all have some prescriptions to share, some wisdom?
I'll just share from a money aspect. Unfortunately, we hear the keeping up with the Joneses, and then as well the tool of technology of social media, be able to have access to what people deem as their perspective of life, that oftentimes isn't the reality. And so what these young people aren't being exposed to is a process. So I think our ability to be able to impact and give them exposure into the reality of life is by us documenting. Like this podcast right here is part of the prescription, right? They're able to see and hear perspectives, even if they're not in a room. And I've been thinking about this even with my own children on I don't know if it's journaling, but there's just notes that I take that I is yes, I'm taking notes for the, that particular day or thoughts, but I'm really thinking about, here you go, right? So they can get an understanding of what I was thinking during that time and also the evolution of it. So I think that what is foreign from one generation to another is the well, I don't say it's foreign, but not as widely used, is how we document our activities, while we have our priorities, and not be frustrated with how people misuse it. Because there's a lot of powerful folks that I know, impactful folks that I know, that are more frustrated with how people misuse social media, and that's why they're not on it. And I appreciate that perspective, but that's what the young folks are, And so, just as you mentioned, Crystal, with TikTok, just as you mentioned with these social media platforms, just because, and I've had to do this to for myself, because low key, high key, I'm a old soul. I like to sit in the back, and I'll listen to slow jams, right? Like, and also, my introduction into business, being an entrepreneur. I was an entrepreneur before I knew how to spell it. You're not gonna be on social media, so like, just even as a practice, like, hey, what we doing? But that element of the prescription is going to be tied to what we document, how we document. And Miss Odessa Wolf, folks, she's a Birmingham legend, and she shared this with me. She said, Isaac, you have to listen and learn, but we also have to learn to listen. And what she was speaking to is this intergenerational connection, right? They have to listen to us to learn, but we have to learn how to listen to them, right? And I think that's the parallel track, when we think about the prescription.
Yeah. And it's, all of this is really making me think of just I guess the multiple ways in which we think about success and define success, and the models that we've had, and the 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 various pathways that we followed and witnessed. And so I guess I'm just kind of wondering, like, how people kind of perceive your success, and even how do you perceive it for yourself? Like, what does it look like, feel like, sound like to you, um, when you think about your success? And then, just how do other people perceive it? Because I always think it's real interesting in how other people perceive your success, and you're like, what are you talking about? This is just my normal way of being. This is what I do all day. But other people see it as success. I'm just curious, how do you all, what does it look like, sound like, feel like to you? And then how do other people perceive it?
I was just gonna say, what's funny is I absolutely love the work that I do. I mean, it's like a dream job, and the passion that is filled on my end with doing this every day, to me, is effortless. But the perception is that, oh, you're a woman of power. You're a shot caller. And I don't see it that way. I help make informed decisions that, others are like, oh my God. Some people feel intimidated. Yeah. I mean, I do get to say no a lot, but I do get to say no a lot, but thinking collectively what's best for the organization, I say no sometimes, right? But people over the years view that as, their perception is that here's the difference between being a boss and a leader. So I like to think of myself as being a leader. I don't want to be pointing fingers and saying, here's what I need you to do while I stand back and sit on my throne. I want to be in the thick and the throes with you. Like today, my custodian, I'm short staffed, right? And so there was a spill, I mopped it up. And one of the students said, "Oh my God, Miss Balogun, you mopped the floors? They got you being a janitor?" And I was like, "Yeah, this is my building."
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
It has to be
So
done.
when I walked in the cafeteria, I had 5 kids picking stuff off the table, not making. Don't get her house dirty. That's when I walked in. So I
Well,
mean, we set the perception. You know.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
so for me, as an academic, I have a lot of models in my life, acronyms and things that I go by. And I mentioned that my life is dedicated to human flourishing, but conversely, it's important for my life to flourish. And so I look at the work of Dr. Martin Seligman, who says flourishing has 5 areas, and it's PERMA, PERMA. So this is kind of how I look, I guess these are kind of the metrics for my own success, if you will. So he says the P is for having a pleasant life, meaning you have life satisfaction and you're content with your life. The E is for having an engaged life, meaning you're able to identify your talents, gifts, and abilities and use them and actually flow with them throughout your day. The R is for having a relational life, meaning I love people and I have people who also love me. The M is for having a meaningful life, which means I live for purpose, on purpose. And the A is achievement, having a life of achievement, have an achieving life. And that means I'm winning at something that matters to me. So in the spirit of wholeness, I look at all those different facets of my life to see what I need to continue to monitor and give more attention to or bring more harmony into my life. So flourishing is the point for me.
PERMA.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Some other thoughts, other ideas.
All right,
Everybody's circulating on that, right?
I'll jump in. Even as we've been talking through this, I have to make sure that I share that my identity growing up was literally in sports. And so the fact that I'm still not playing football was something that I'm still wrestling with. So that was you made it, NFL. My brother played a couple of years in the league. And of course, financially, you want to change everything for your family. And so when that didn't happen, and I mentioned it earlier, that my identity was in football. So when other people saw me, it was, you going to the NFL, you going to the NFL. And so when that did not happen, how I saw myself was through that lens, right? Unfortunately, right? Because of that identity, right? More so the little God. And so even as my responsibilities have transitioned into, business and some board appointments, um, you know, I really just, to Crystal's points, I fall in love with solving problems, and so oftentimes it's, I'm tapped on the shoulder like, hey, this or what, I'm like, all right, that's cool. But if you know how big the problem was, we wouldn't be over here kicking it, right? Like, and so, so I think that unfortunately as well in the Black community, whenever there is some type of elevation in one's situation, they think that the process is easy or quick because you make it look that way. Colleague of mine, he said, "Man, I'll never look like what I've been through," and I think that rhythm in life can unfortunately not give the full perspective of a process. And so when they see your appointment or they see the just the growth, they don't take into consideration whatever pain that you went through. And so unfortunately, if the community or others do not have a open we'll just say a open space to communicate, then whatever they're saying in their head or whatever frustrations that they're they have with themselves, they're going to place it on your process. And so but yeah, I to Crystal's point, I thoroughly enjoy what we do. Success, that's more, when I think about success, it's more of what is going to outlive me. And team knows that I don't want to be a part of anything if it's not going to outlive me. And that's it ultimately. Yeah, so I'll stop.
Ain't nothing else left really to say. I mean, I think they covered it. I think the one thing I was just thinking about is how success has changed for me over the decades. And I would say right now, like, I just entered into my 40s, and it's actually not about another job or another title or having more money. For me, success is about, am I walking in my purpose? Am I doing what I'm created to do every day? And do I have the right rhythm to do it in my life? So not the work-life balance, but have I figured out the rhythm with all the different hats that I'm called to wear in this season? And if I go to bed at night with that, saying, God, I'm doing what I'm supposed to do, then I feel like I'm successful, which is fundamentally different than 10 years ago when it was like, you got to get married, you got to have kids, you got to move into this neighborhood, you got to make this amount of money. And for my family, everybody's like, you're successful, right? Like, you're the first college graduate in our family. You're the first one that's going to get postgraduate degrees. Like, you're living the life. And I'm just like, to your point, I think nobody knows what really caused that, and the pressures that I used to carry from them, trying to be the perfect child, if that's even a thing. I had to let all that go, because as soon as I did something that was outside of that perfect way, it was like, oh, Mia, you failed. Like, how could you? Not Mia, you weren't supposed to do that. So, they tell you when you wake up, when you turn 40, it's like, bam, the light goes off. And I was just like, I got to let all that go, because that kind of stress is killing us.
Yeah. I love that. I hear a lot of legacy language, like, the success is tied to legacies and what we're taking, what we've taken through our own lineage, and then what we're giving in terms of our legacies, and what we give, at least from this conversation, is more about helping each other kind of unpack, examine some of the things that we've experienced, but then also just finding and defining success for yourself without these ideas about it should look like X, Y, and Z. And if you don't achieve that, then you're a failure. No.
Yeah. And the work is ongoing. I don't hear from any people who have shared that, like, it's done, you've arrived, it's a wrap. You know what I mean? I've mastered it. It's like, y'all probably were working on some stuff today, maybe 20 minutes before this recording. So thank you all for your transparency. And this conversation was nourishing for my spirit. I hope it was the same for y'all. Would love to close before we have you share how people can follow you or get in contact with you. Can each of you share what is one source of joy for you that you would recommend for anyone listening? What's a source of joy that you would recommend for anyone listening?
I love this question. Let me write this down.
Well,
good question.
As everything else in my life, I have a model.
Go ahead and teach.
So mine are the 4 P's. These are the 4 things that bring me joy: people, places, projects, and products. So all kinds of people, families, friends, colleagues, neighbors, all of that. Places, I love to travel, throughout the States and of course abroad. Projects, that's my work and all the things I have my hands in, like Isaac mentioned, being on boards and things of that nature. And then the products are just the outcomes of my work or the fruit of my labor. So all of those bring me great joy.
Oh, I love it. I was thinking products, literally products, not thinking of outcomes. So I'm glad you said that. That's some vanity I got to work through. Thank you, Dr. Angela. Other folks, a source of joy that you would recommend to anyone listening?
For me, I deeply have come to understand you cannot do life alone.
Mm.
You need a good covenant group. I'm talking about folks who gonna hold you accountable, keep you in the Word of God, who also you can laugh with and travel with, and shed tears with, and show up in life with. Um, it has given me so much joy to find that group for me.
Mm-hmm. Covenant group.
Two things came to mind. Quiet time. So I wake up early, extremely early. It's times where I have uninterrupted thoughts unless I choose to interrupt it.
Mhm.
Right, folks ain't on social media, so you ain't gotta worry about that. And now if they text and calling at 4 o'clock in the morning, hopefully that's a workout partner or something like that. But quiet time, and just being at peace, being still, you'll find so much joy in that. You will
Mhm.
find so much joy because there's clarity in that.
Yep.
No music, no coffee, no nothing. Dry mouth, you ain't even brush your teeth yet, right? Like just sit still and just be at, and just, it's gonna feel weird for a little bit. For probably about 20, 30 seconds, your mind's gonna, but just sit still, quiet time. Second thing is music. Love me some music. So find you some good tunes and have a release. Sometimes that may be the gym for someone, but cutting the rug a little bit sometimes make you feel good, regardless of what you're going through. And so music is definitely a source of joy for me.
So I was going to say, which I just got into in the last maybe 4 to 5 years, is journaling. Oh my God.
Mhm.
Oh my God. The joy that when you're able to reflect where you were a year ago. I can't believe I thought that. I can't believe that's where I was. But that has brought me so much peace and joy. And then the other thing, I can't believe I went through this whole segment and didn't mention him. My husband brings me so much joy. That's my, oh my God. Yeah. That man right there. Can you believe next year this time, I would have been married half of my life. So this is the third marriage. So I didn't even get to tell y'all that. But yeah, half of my life. And I'm happy this time.
Mhm.
Yes. Shout out to Ben.
Hey Ben.
Candace, what about you?
Source of joy. Oh my gosh. I gotta go with the quiet. Just the quiet moments where I can like deeply reflect. And sometimes it's when I'm driving and I am that person who is driving and 10 miles later I'm like, how did I get
Yeah.
how did I get here? Like, oh, it's time for me to get off the interstate. But that's my exit. Okay. But just that quiet time just to sit and reflect on the day or something that was maybe a challenge or come back to something that I was thinking about earlier, just to kind of work through that. It really does bring me kind of some joy and peace. And I feel like a little settled kind of in my spirit when I'm able to do that. So that definitely brings me joy. Just warm weather and the beach. I mean, that kind of stuff for sure. But just those moments where I can just like sit and be quiet and really think and reflect.
I love
I get
it.
a lot of joy out of that.
I love it. For me lately, it's been serving. I started serving in ministry at my church, and as I'm always getting full and fed from my church, and I wanted to be able to serve and utilize the same gifts I get paid for, the same gifts that God designed me with in ministry. And serving has brought a new sense of joy, a new sense of honoring the present of the present. That has been really good. So if you can serve in any capacity, any volunteer basis, to use your gifts to support others, that's a great sense of joy.
Absolutely.
So
This
yeah,
has been great. Again, I have notes. I will be coming back to these notes. But before we sign off from the front porch, or before we leave the front porch, where can folks follow you all? Where can they find you?
I'm on social media, but not very active.
That's okay. But we
I
can
got
still
all
follow
the
you.
accounts, but I'm a little bit unplugged right now, intentionally.
got it. So you can follow Dr. Angela through all the gems that she dropped on this here podcast. Peace and perma and the third track of wholeness.
Right.
Follow her example. That's what you can follow.
You remember.
Other folks.
Well, I guess I'll throw I would follow our project. So we have a financial freedom project where we are teaching financial literacy to elementary schools, middle schools, and high school students. So you can follow Financial Freedom Project on all platforms: Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, LinkedIn, and then of course you can find me on those as well. Just my name, Isaac Cooper. We share a lot of information, and so more than anything, it will be informative, because as we all know, with money and technology, there's a lot more misinformation on how to use both. So we look to essentially, cut through the fat and get you what you need. So Financial Freedom Project to see what these babies learning. And then of course you can connect with me personally on all the social media platforms.
Financial Freedom
Project. Yes, ma'am.
So I'm somewhat like Angela. And this must be the baby boomer thing, right? Like I'm plugged into every platform, but I'm not really. I just want to kind of be nosy a little bit. See what everybody else is doing, but I never post anything, so I have nothing to follow.
That's in social media drive-bys.
Follow the wisdom and the gems that Crystal has dropped.
Amen. And there's some wisdom for not being on too at times for my baby boomers. I'm usually on LinkedIn and Facebook. Me and Meadows pretty easy to find.
Absolutely. Thank you all for coming to the front porch. It has been wonderful. You all have been a blessing to our spirit. We will make sure that all of your social media handles are a part of this broadcast. And thank you all again for coming to the front porch. We'll see you next time.